Hello everyone. I want to speak in this video about Vesta. This is such an interesting conversation, interesting topic. There's so much more that I want to learn about this too. But I had a few insights, and these insights are timely because of what's happening with Vesta. So, first, the astrology. Vesta is in Virgo, moving to square the nodal axis and then oppose Neptune. This Vesta in Virgo will soon go retrograde a little bit later in the year and go back to square the nodes twice more until the end of May and oppose Neptune as well by June. And this whole cycle began in November from the point that it'll retrograde back to, and it'll end in June. So we're relatively in the beginning of this very important Vesta phase, and this is one of those things you probably won't hear much about or think much about because Vesta isn't a very prominent, well-known archetype. It's an asteroid goddess. It's not what you hear about most of the time. So the insight that I had was, we just finished Chanuka, and every day I lit the Menorah with my family. And I realized that the Menorah is a Vesta thing. So what is Vesta? Vesta corresponds to the eternal flame. And it represents in our own life where we're upholding this quality of sacred devotion and service to what is essentially important. It's our sacred function. And Adam Gainsbourg once beautifully described it to me as, if the house is falling down, Vesta is where we're holding up the walls. So in ancient times, the Vesta function has actually expressed in many ways. All planetary functions have taken on different shapes and forms in different eras of human history. So it's actually really important when we look back in history that we are open to seeing even more layers, more of the truth. So I'm going to speak about one element that I know a little bit about, which is the ancient prevalence of temple culture. So in ancient cultures all around the world, there were temples, and that temple was the place where you would worship your deity, you would do your practices, and culture was really centralized around temple. And there were people whose role and purpose it was to uphold the grounds of the temple, serve the people. They were educated, they had a lot of knowledge, they would do their rituals and practices. There was music, there was art, there was education, often sacred sexual practices as well. And again, there's a history to all of this that precedes temple. Before humans began doing that I would say is a lot more nature-based, less role-oriented. That's something I'm very interested in exploring, in particular when it comes to Judaism. Because our knowledge of Judaism, as it is per, pretty much, let me straighten this camera, sorry about that. As it is per all cultures and religions, right now, as it is not what it used to be. But there was a time, a few thousand years ago, where the Jewish people didn't go to synagogue to read the holy books. There was no synagogue. There were no books. This is before canonization, before anything was sort of codified as like, this is sacred text. All the Jewish people in Israel, they would centralize around certain holidays, certain times of the year, which were also at the core much more oriented around seasons as well, to the temple in Jerusalem. They would go on the Shlosh Regilim, the 3 holidays of the year, to Yerushalayim, to the Beis HaMikdash, to Jerusalem, to the temple, where the Levites and the Kohanim, the priests, would be there, and they would perform the sacred rituals and the rites and offer the sacrifices. There's a whole culture and education and learning and practice and ritual built around the temple space. And so the maintaining of the temple space wasn't just like, and this is not just Judaism, it's like this is sort of a way of culture that was pretty universal. It was where everything grew and developed. And the importance of the sacred flame, it represented keeping the principle of the eternal, what is holy and sacred and of eternal essence, alive. And so it's a very common ritual practice. Every day you light the candles again, you keep the flame going. And it just dawned on me, like, oh yeah, the menorah, which actually had 7 branches, not 9 or 8 like we do today, was lit every day in the Beis HaMikdash, in the temple. And I'm actually curious to learn more about like what the meaning of the menorah was, because I don't actually know too much about it. Everything has, of course, a very much deeper mystical, there's a lot of mysticism that would occur every day in the temple. So in the Chanuka itself, the holiday of Chanuka came because that menorah, the 7-branch menorah, after the temple was desecrated by was it the Romans? I think the Romans? Yavanim. Whoever the Yavanim are Greeks or Romans. The Greeks, it was the Greeks. After it was desecrated by the Greeks, there was a rebellion. The Maccabees, the Jewish rebellion group, won. But afterwards, when they rededicated the temple, and this is important for Vesta, when they rededicated the temple, there wasn't enough oil to light the menorah. There was just enough oil for one day, but it lasted for 8 days. Now, what happened in the story of Chanuka, this is also a part of the insight, it was all about rededication. Like, this is a Vesta thing. The entirety of the holiday is like a reconnection to Vesta energy. You've lit the menorah. Like, why is the central theme of Chanuka this miracle around oil lasting for 8 days? Because of the importance of the menorah and what it represented. I was talking to my sister Alana, and she shared a cool insight, which is the rededication of the temple. It wasn't like a new temple. It was an old temple. It was just rededicating it to its existent purpose. And that's a teaching for us. Like, we don't create something new. We're coming back to what our purpose is, what our holy function is. But maybe it was desecrated. Maybe we forgot. Maybe we let some other thoughts in and got confused for a while. So when we rededicate the temple, we're starting where we are with what we got. And that was the beauty of this miracle, where it's like they just started with what they could, and then there was grace that set in, and the oil lasted for 8 days. In Hebrew, the word for rededication is Chanuka. That's what that word means. Chanuka, lachanoch is to dedicate. So Chanuka is a holiday of rededication. That's one of the deeper teachings, actually, of this particular holiday. You know, lighting the menorah is very much symbolic of rededicating ourselves to come back to our sacred function. Now, Vesta in Virgo. This is about that. Vesta in Virgo is the floor that you are sweeping, the space that you are maintaining order and wellness and health and maintenance. What's Virgo all about? It's never about perfection, because you're never going to get that. It's about maintaining wellness and functionality in every aspect of our life. And so the Virgo function for each one of us is where we are called to show up, be present for it, walk this path of karma yoga, of purification and healing through presence and love in our service. The challenge with this archetype is when we can get too hooked on perfect. Like, I gotta make sure the temple's all clean, and I do the ritual right, and I sacrifice the animal in just the right way. And we know in Judeo-Christian culture that Virgo Pisces axis has very much been about these ideals of perfection, doing it right. And so the emphasis has falsely been on the form, on the structure, on the practice itself, and forgetting the heart, the true devotion, the healing that happens in our work, in our efforts. This is one of the teachings that this Vesta signature and this phase really teaches us. So Vesta squaring the nodal axis really brings up that tension between the Sagittarius-Virgo dynamic, which could be belief systems that really point us to our inherent inferiority and sinfulness. And then because of what we believe, we practice Virgo, and we dedicate our lives, and we relate to the altar of our life from a more masochistic point of view. The teaching in this axis is to actually open our minds, be open to other ways of thinking, so that we are putting a little bit of a wedge in any kind of dogmatism that might otherwise have us get too fixed and stuck on the way it's supposed to be. The way. I have to do it this way. I have to line up my shoes by the door in this way. And if, what happens? The Gemini comes in and says, well, what if you don't? Like, what if you organize it differently? Is there another way of thinking of this? So that it's kind of pushing at the mind that will get fixed on perfectionism. And then we're able to access this direct experience. Like the Sagittarius element wants us to have a direct experience of healing, of growth, of truth. It wants insight. So Vesta is our altar. So you might have an altar in your home, you might have a candle that you create, you might have a practice. That's one symbolic aspect of Vesta. And there are many more dimensions of Vesta that also speak to sexuality, and this is something I'm deeply curious about, thinking about it, and just the history of Vesta as it pertains to how we are in relationship to the physical world in general. I'll save that for another video, especially as I just kind of tune in more and learn more about this. But you can think of everything that you're doing from a Vesta point of view. How are you relating to that altar space? Is it about the form and doing the practice right? Right? Because we're not going to have a direct experience. We're not going to grow and learn. We're not going to heal if the focus is on just the form. So this is an opportunity to bring more openness and willingness to be in service to connect to the holiness and rededicate ourselves to the holiness of our life. And the teaching is you're not going to get it right. You're not going to be perfect. So just start. The challenge here can be either hyper control, which connects to us. Like there's something that I'm here to do, right? There's a purpose, there's a function, there's a holiness. But you know, the issue with Virgo is this whole distorted idea of virgin, this concept of purity. But virgin actually means one that is whole unto themselves. It really speaks more to one's sovereignty and freedom of being. Right? So it could be this control, or it can be this, well, I don't want to do anything because I'm not ready yet, or I'm not perfect. And that disallows and limits the joy and the gift and the importance of living a holy life and sharing and giving. And what we give is what we receive. The service that, when it's coming from an authentic place, our service and our work in the world, when it's of love, when we know that we're healing and we're purifying our own vessel, our own being through the work, that's what, to me, true karma yoga is. It's spiritual purification through service. But we have to not think of it as like, this is what I gotta do. Yeah, this is my service, or I signed up for a seva, and this is my hour shift of karma yoga. Like it has to actually come from this authentic, selfless place of, I'm not doing this because of the results, or to fulfill a duty, or to check it off the list. I'm doing this because this is me healing, and healing is returning our minds back to love, back to oneness. It's a really beautiful thing to lock into a path of life where we can feel our own healing and purification through our work. So the invitation is to get started and just to do the best that we can. Jeff Green often says with Virgo, the value is in the effort. And I would add to that the effort itself isn't even the physical work. It's the consciousness we bring to whatever we do. And then it's okay whatever your shoes look like if they're not totally lined up. And then the Vesta opposition to Neptune, which is very strong, also really speaks to that. It's like the miracle of Chanuka. They did what they could with what they had. Virgo, Vesta. Neptune, miracle, came in and said, great, all you had to do was light what you can light. I took care of the rest. Grace takes care of the rest. She reminds me of that Leonard Cohen quote, forget your perfect offering, just ring the bell that you can ring. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. And if we don't ring that bell, we don't create the space for whatever wants to come through us, because all form is just a vessel for something beyond the form to work through it. And we dedicate and make ourselves available for that through our cultivation, through our devotion. All right, thank you. Much love to you all. Reminder that the Heart and Soul Centered Astrology Essentials course starts January 10th. You can learn more about that in the link below. And I posted a video yesterday on a free introductory class that I gave on this course, and also the work that I do. my perspective of astrology, life, karma, soul, and what love has to do with it all. It was a very insightful and authentic class. So if there's any interest or curiosity about my course, please check out that class.